So far, we've seen strides that are combo enablers or strides that are crazy finishers. But this time, let's take a look at strides that interact with your field, either repopulate the board or build a board out of nothing, or interact with your opponent's field for strong power push turns.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and yet again we talk about the brand new reveals for the upcoming P Clan collection because we have a lot more strides and G-Guards to cover as we're doing some catch up with all the latest reveals. And this time we're going to take a look at strides, as already portrayed into the intro, about strides that interact either with creating a field out of thin air or repopulate the board of a sticky situation, or in the case of the last clan that we're going to tackle, empower your field when your opponent isn't really pressuring you at all. Because this time we're going to take a look at the new strides and G-Guards for Royal Palin, Gold Palin, and no, not Shadow Palin because we already tackled that one. It is none other than Kakarot. So with that said, let's first dive into the new strides and G-Guards for Royal Palin, because for Royal Palin we got the brand new stride in the likes of Stunned Divine Knight Eurogeus. I think that's how you pronounce it. We're just gonna go with that one. So Eurogeus has the effect: auto on Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks, cost counterless 1 and turn a card from your G zone face up. Draw the same number of cards as the number of your rear guards, choose the same number of cards from your hand as the number of cards drawn and call them to the rearguard circle. Then, if you have 5 or more rearguards, get an imaginary gift force. So essentially, in value wise, this card doesn't really do a lot, because you don't plus off this skill, as you're going to draw a couple of cards, but you need to call the same amount of cards. You do get a force if you have 5 rearguards, but it also means you're going to lose the units that are on the field, which might not always be ideal, because especially in Royal Palin, which is a rearguard focused clan. So you might think yourself, what is the actual purpose of this card and the value of this particular stride? Well, so far I can deduce 2 particular aspects where this card can shine. First off, this might actually be an ideal card to go into if you have a pretty bricky hand, because maybe you don't have the ideal cards, you cannot really combo off with any other stride, and that means you're probably going to waste a stride turn, which you don't want to do. At the very least, you want to generate at least some value. This card allows you to get in that situation that allows you to fix your hand and still apply some pressure with a bricky hand, because you can just call units from your hand onto the board that don't really do anything, just attack with it, use this effect to draw into some new cards, maybe fix your hand a little bit, and potentially combo off of the newly drawn unit, which allows you to go into a different direction. And this also allows you to potentially build a deck that mainly works on plays from hands or mainly on plays effects, which also grades that don't really work with the general gameplay of Royal Palin, because Royal Palin is known for searching out grade 2s. So grade 1s and grade 3s are lacking a bit behind here. With this stride, that might not be the case, because now it seems you're going to draw into a surplus of cards. Maybe this card allows you to draw into those grade 1s and grade 3s that allows you to extend even further that you couldn't have done with like your grade 2 searchers or superior callers. So this might have a niche in that situation. But another interaction this card might work wonders with is the Dual Knight archetype for the V Premium version, because those cards actually get value if you call cards on top of them. So in a generic sense, you're not gonna plus off this skill because you're gonna draw the same amount, call the same amount, and the units that are on the field are gonna get retired, so you don't plus. But if those cards are Dual Knights, which you're going to call on top of, then it's a different story, because those Dual Knights will give you some value. Either more power on the board, maybe criticals, maybe some extra draws, depending on what you're going to superior call over. So depending on what archetype you're playing, either this card can be like a brick card you can go into to fix your hand a little bit, or this could actually be a combo enabler for Dual Knights. Now, how good it's going to be, I don't know, because keep in mind, we also have the stride that copies the hard card effects. And in Dual Knight, we do have the new grade 3 Dual Knight, Solomé, which maybe is just a better grade 3 to go into in terms of skills, because that probably works better with Dual Knight archetype. But again, it all comes down to what type of cards you drawn, and if you brick or not. This could also just be a very generic, safe option to go into. Now, in terms of the new G-Guard that Royal Palin has access to, we have Faithful Sacred Staff Margos. And Margos has the effect, although when the unit is put in the Guardian Circle, choose one of your grade 2 units until the end of turn, it gets shield plus 10k, and although when this unit intercepts, cost counter plus 1 and soul plus 1, choose one of your units and it cannot be hit until the end of battle. So it's once again a perfect guard G-Guard. But this one works a lot differently than all the other cards. So for the cost, it's a counter with Soul Bless, which isn't the most expensive to pay for a perfect guard G-Guard, but there is a caveat to this particular card. Just like most G-Guards for Royal Palin, you're dependent on having units. So if you're up against a deck that just removes your entire board, this doesn't really do anything. But in the case that doesn't happen, you actually have probably the best Perfect Guard G-Guard in the game right now, because unlike most other G-Guards, the Perfect Guard effect and the G-Guard shield are separate on 2 different units. So that means you can actually get value off of the G-Guard shield potential on a weaker attack, set up the Perfect Guard, and the moment they attack with their big columns, then you intercept with the unit, and you have the Perfect Guard effect. Because any other card, or Perfect Guard G-Guard, that means you need the G-Guard on the same attack that you're going to Perfect Guard, which means you potentially just waste the shield value of the Perfect Guard. But the downside of that is that the unit that gets the effect needs to intercept, which means your opponent can just hit into that unit. So, depending on the scenarios, you need to be very careful when using this effect, because if you just use it willy-nilly, your opponent can deny the Perfect Guard effect, because if they have like mid-battle phase retire options, or binding or whatnot, or bouncing, they can deny the effect, so you need to be very careful on this one. So, it's very situational, but in the right circumstances, this is probably the best Perfect Guard G-Guard that we have so far. Now, that brings us to Gold Palin, and for Gold Palin, we have a very interesting stride, because if I remember correctly, this is the very first restanding stride for Gold Palin. I could be misremembering something, but I believe we haven't had one so far, because the new stride for Gold Palin is Golden Knight of Glory Itvarius, and Itvarius has the effect, continuous Vanguard Circle. All of your rear guards placed by a card's ability this turn get power plus 5k. So just a passive boost to the front row, which is nice, or even potentially back row, but probably mainly front row, which also means your Extol 2 circles will have the same value as Extol 1, so you're gonna hit for pretty decent numbers. But the main application, or the main value of this card, lies in her second effect, which is Auto Vanguard Circle. Once a turn, when this unit attacks, cost counter plus 1, put all of your rest rear guards on the bottom of your deck in any order, choose up to 2 cards from your hand and call them to the rear guard circle. If you put 4 or more cards on the bottom of your deck at the end of the battle, stand this unit and it gets drive -2 until the end of turn. So a second Vanguard swing with a single drive on the second one, so 4 drive checks, 2 Vanguard swings in total, which is really nice, while also adding multi-attacks on your field, because you just called 2 new units, which means more attacks. That sounds very good, and can potentially be a strong finisher, but we need to be aware of a certain situation here, because in value-wise, it's not that great, because you lose 4 units if you want to get the restand, so that you go -4, then the 2 units you call can also be regarded as -2, so in total -6, because those 2 cards from your hand you lose. So if you call anything besides Great Freeze, you're going to lose shield value that doesn't really generate itself back, because the second swing is just 1 drive check. So you lose 6 cards in total, but only get 1 back. That's not really ideal. So you need to be very careful and understand what you're sacrificing for the value you generate in order to know if this stride is worth it. Now, if you don't really value the cards on the field, you don't really regard them as minuses, then this might not be as bad, because it goes -1 for the value of getting an extra Vanguard attack, which might be worth it, especially if your opponent is wasting more cards than that 1 card you're investing in achieving this. But more importantly, what's nice about this is that because of our continuous effect, the newly called cards are going to get a little bit of power, but because we're Gold Palin, we have cards like Wonder Azel and Sacramore, which allows you to extend those attacks into more attacks, because you're going to call them from hand, use effects, call more cards, and just suddenly can replenish your entire board. And one thing I overlooked with the Royal Palin stride we just looked at, and it also applies to this Gold Palin stride, they counter Gredora, Because you call cards from hand. So Gredora's stun effects, or forcing you to not able to call, doesn't apply here because she blocks anything except calling from hand. And because these strides, the Gold Palin and a Royal Palin one, both allow you to call cards from your hand through their effect, means it circumvents that interaction. So this could be nice counter picks in a meta where Gredora is running rampant, and with the new Mega Conley stride we've seen last time, that might be very plausible. So this could be nice counters to those situations. Now if we take a look at the Gold Palin G-Guard, we got a very spicy G-Guard, which is Golden Dragon, Sanctified Dragon. And this G-Guard has the effect, although when the units put on the Guardian Circle cost Soul + 1, look the 2 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 2 unit cards from among them, call them to the Rearguard Circle, and discard the rest. If you called 1 or more grade 1 or greater cards, draw a card. This G-Guard is honestly pretty strong. Yes, it's no plus 5k for the entire turn, yes, it's no perfect guard, but it's honestly almost as good in terms of value it generates, because for 1 Soul Blast, you get 2 extra cards as shield, which, yes, can be both grade 3s, but in the case it isn't, you could have like a 25k block, maybe like a 45k block if you see 2 triggers, but on top of that, in most instances, you're gonna draw a card off it. So for 1 Soul Blast, you get a beefy amount of shield, and you get a +1 which gets to your hand, which means there's more shield you can place down to block the potential attack. So in a lot of situations, this might be as good as a perfect guard. And in some situations where a perfect guard isn't needed, this generates even more value. So I think this is a very nice versatile card, and keep in mind Gold Palin already had a specific interaction where you could generate a perfect guard effect of a G-Guard, because I believe because this card also have that potential, because if you call one of the perfect guards that doesn't have the requirement to be called from hand, you call the perfect guard, discard a card, and then you basically go ham. And funny enough, because this card specifically says grade 1 or greater, those specific perfect guard I'm talking about are grade 1s. So if you call those, you draw a card with this skill, and you can use that card as a discard fodder to activate the perfect guard of this effect. So again, a very versatile card that has a lot of applications and isn't pigeonholed in one situation. Yes, it's a little bit RNG, but depending on how much you know about your matchups and how good you're filled to your deck, you can at least increase the amount of consistency this card generates in the terms of guard potential. Now, with Gold Palin discussed, that brings us to the final clan, which is Kakarot. And this is a little bit different because instead of field building, we're basically working around an empty field while empowering our own field. Because the brand new stride for Kakarot is Divine Dragon Knight Barakat. And Barakat has the effect, although in Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks, turn a card from your G-Zone face up, and if your opponent has 3 or more open rearguard circles, this unit gets power plus 10k, critical plus 1, and drive plus 1 until the end of the battle. If they have 5 or more, all of your rearguards get power plus 10k until the end of turn. This card is probably one of the better strides to go into if your opponent didn't dedicate cards to the field. And they might already not really dedicate cards to the field because of your strong restanders like Dumbjit and whatnot that can already retire some cards on the field, and you also have rearguards that retire stuff, so they might not really pressure you all too much. And if you get first stride and the board is empty, this might honestly be a better stride to go into than Dumbjit, because yes, Dumbjit is a restander, but the problem is it doesn't fix the issues that Kakarot already has, and that's that your rearguards really don't smack for anything. And this card, honestly, fixes that a lot. Because first off, this card will swing for 38k, double crit, quadruple drive. But in those other situations, your columns will potentially get plus 20k, and you also have your force marker to take in consideration, so suddenly your rearguards smack for hard numbers. Your Vanguard comes with significant pressure, which basically means they need a PG or GG, and then you can put all the other respective pressure of your triggers onto your rearguards, thus allowing you to pressure as well with your rearguards. So suddenly from having only 2 pressure attacks with your restanders, you go to potentially having 3 pressure attacks with your rearguards also being empowered. Now of course this won't be be the go-to stride for every situation, because sometimes going in Dumbjet might be more worth it, or going to a different finisher for Kakarot, it can be more worth it. Like if they have an entire board filled up, then maybe going into Sunburst, the premium collection stride from last time that wipes the entire board, might be ideal. This is basically similar to what we see with Narukami, where this card plays nicely into the previous stride, where the same goes with Narukami, with both strides working perfect in tandem into each other. Same situation here for Kakarot, which is a nice addition, because now Kakarot has a solid stride for every single situation. Have they a filled board? You can go into Sunburst. If they have an empty board, you can go into this. If they have like 1 or 2 units, you can go potentially in Dumbjet if a restand gives you the value you need. And again, now that you have another solid first stride option potentially that pressure your opponent, you can save your Dumbjets for the turns they're gonna matter, and that is where you have multiple perfect cards in your drop zone, so your Dumbjet stride will swing for insane numbers, which is going to be needed with the new perfect guard G guards being a thing. So you want to save those big numbers for the later turns, so they will matter the most. Now I know there will be some controversy with the Kakarot stride, because I've seen people being on both sides of the field, either being very pro for it or very against the card. But one thing I don't think there should be any debate is about the new G-Guard for Kakarot, because this new G-Guard for Kakarot, although it might look weird, is insane for a very specific spicy archetype within Kakarot that just came into existence. Because the brand new G-Guard for Kakarot is Blaze Dragon Dance Salima, and Salima has the effect, although the number of cards discarded from your hand for this cost is reduced by 1 for each of your opponent's open Vanguard circles. When these units put on the Guardian circle, cost Soldiers 1, and discard 4 cards from your hand, choose one of your units and it cannot be hit until the end of the battle. So for Soul Blast and a certain amount of discard, you have the perfect guard effect on this G-Guard. Now you might think to yourself, wait, hold on a moment, what's the point of this G-Guard? Because your opponent's turn, they call field, and this card becomes very unplayable, even more so unplayable than the G-Guard for Gear Chronicle. Like, people are already complaining that discard 2 extra cards for the perfect guard is not worth it. In this case, it's discard 4. The thing is, we have a couple of options for Kakarot. One is the G-Guards that are already in play. We can use the Now Griffin to retire an extra card, which means 1 less discard. Or you can use Defeat Flare if you're an Overlord player and wipe the entire back row, which means you minus this with a discard of 3. But the card that I'm actually talking about, and the archetype that I'm referring to, is none other than Lawkeeper. Lawkeeper and this card are made for each other, because with Lawkeeper, your opponent is forced to basically remove half their board every single time they go into the battle phase, which already means you're crippling their offensive. Then you can make the offensive even less threatening by having access to the Now Griffin to retire another unit, or now this card, which potentially can be a Soul Blast for a perfect guard, or maybe Soul Blast in a discard for a perfect guard. With this new addition to the G-Zone, the Lawkeeper stun deck or stall deck becomes all the more viable, because you have yet another very strong defensive options, thus making it more plausible that you will last until the late game, where you will kill your opponent with either Dumbjet restands or the brand new strat for Kakarot that just swings with extra crits and other pressures. So honestly, a pretty good G-Guard, do I say so myself. I think this is a very nice addition for Kakarot, and I think a lot of Kakarot players will be very pleased with this, be it if you're an Overlord player, a Blade Master player, a Dumbjet player, a Cross player, or potentially the new Spicy Boys among the Lawkeepers. But that said, that's all everything that I want to talk about today. Let me know what you guys think of these new cards for Royal Palin, Gold Palin, and Kakarot, as we do have a lot of things to go over. There's a lot of applications to these cards for very specific situations, or in some cases a bit more broad. So I'm very curious of what you guys think of these cards, so let me know in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget, if you're interested in any of these cards, then definitely get your pre-orders ready for on Parkage, and don't forget to use the discount code PKTimeleap to get 5% discount on your entire order. But with that said, huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/Insider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can go to patreon.com/Insider and become a patron today. But further than that, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and see you guys in the next one.